All right, welcome back to the 454 Marketing Minute. I'm Chad Coltman, and I'm with Paul Bresenden, the CEO and president of 454 Creative. And today we are going to talk about some of what we think is in store for the year ahead for digital advertising. It was quite a roller coaster of a year last year when it came to online advertising. There's some stuff to unpack from the year behind us, but there's also a lot to look forward to in the year ahead. So, Paul, let's start by just kind of looking over our shoulder. What are some of the things that we saw with digital advertising over the last year?
Yeah, I think it's been a wild ride, right?
Hmm.
Well, let's just throw out a few things. There clearly been some winners and losers in the last year. We've seen a lot of brands, especially, we do a lot of work with credit unions, higher ed, B2B professional services. Um, there are a lot of industries were affected disproportionately in this last year. The rate environment made a lot of things like the cost of borrowing money for an industry like credit unions or community banking really expensive. And so you saw a lot of those types of organizations pull back on their bigger initiatives. Most people are doing their regular marketing activities and executing those well, but most of the long range activities, big web projects, marketing automation implementation, a lot of those just got kicked forward into a future budget year. And so
Hmm.
there's been a more focused energy in those types of markets towards revenue generation, lead acquisition,
Hmm.
those sorts of things. And so we're seeing, especially in digital ads, the cost structure for digital ads just kind of go through the roof. People that were
Hmm.
paying $60, $70 to acquire a new customer are now paying $800, $900 in some cases for a specific product that got very competitive and all of a sudden
Hmm.
blew up. And obviously that's untenable for an organization. They can't pay those customer acquisition costs. So
Right.
by the time they catch that sort of activity, they really have to be drastic in what they do that's different. So there are some in terms of ads where that's, you're seeing this steady sort of increase in customer acquisition cost. The other thing that we're seeing is that AI has really made the platforms change how they run ads to be this more AI driven model. So Google has
Hmm.
uh, PMax campaigns or Performance Max campaigns. They launched what they're calling demand gen campaigns. Uh, Facebook Meta is doing a lot of the same things. What they're saying, hey, don't
Yeah.
worry about how to create the ads. Just give us all the raw assets. Give me some images. Give us some like broad targeting criteria and some headlines. We'll figure everything out. We'll figure out
Yeah.
where to serve it, who you're going to target, what you're going to bid on it. And so you have all of these sort of automated AI driven PPC or digital ad strategies.
Hmm.
And so and we'll talk about this a little bit later in terms of our prediction, but the intent was that is to make advertising more accessible, to make more people be able to spin up ad campaigns faster, run them faster, and get better results. And so the initial data showed that those were actually performing better. I would say that the post data, right, like once they've been running for a
Mm.
few months, has rapidly tailed off. And
Yeah.
so now that we're actually seeing the performance of those, it's a little bit disappointing in that you had some early initial big hits, and now you've removed a lot of the levers that you would pull from optimizing a campaign like that. And so
Hmm.
now, you have to set account level negative keywords or be really specific with what you're trying to do because you're getting a lot more injected in there. We're seeing a lot more ad fraud. We're seeing a lot more
Hmm.
waste in the process, and it's becoming a little bit harder to eliminate that with those ad campaigns.
Well, I think we're kind of losing control of the process too. I think
Yeah,
about Meta and they have their creative advantage ads where you just put all the assets in and that's fine. But then they also have their creative enhancements that they started doing, where
right.
all of a sudden you have a beautiful graphic that they've overlaid this terrible text in a horrible font in a weird color, and some clients are looking at these ads going, what is this? This isn't what we designed or what we deployed, and realizing, oh, it's because Facebook's decided to, you know, put their own spin on it, thinking that it'll improve
Yeah,
performance. And, maybe in some ways it will, but in other ways it's kind of degrading the brand and their identity. And So it does feel like this weird kind of tug of war where you're kind of giving up control for better performance, but at the same time you're kind of losing grasp of, what you were setting out to do in the original, in the beginning, and that's been a little bit of a tightrope to walk.
It's funny you mentioned that. I feel like we should just give some specific examples so people understand what we're talking about in these scenarios.
Yeah.
Um, we have a client that's trying to reach a specific audience, a specific segment. And so they're targeting an industry and a job title, and they're going after that. Now, in these sort of creative plus placements, you can give them an audience, but this audience type just says, hey, we think we're optimized more. We know better than you do. We know who to
Yeah.
reach. And so you can tell us who to reach, but we're going to expand that out if we think we can get more conversions.
Hmm.
And so that sounds very promising. The problem is this client wants a particular audience because that's the
Right.
only people they sell to.
Right.
And so now,
Facebook doesn't know their
because
business model.
no, and doesn't
Right.
care. And then there's so much ad fraud or fraudulent accounts and fraudulent activity that already exists on Facebook. And so when this filters back into the website and the CRM, we actually have been looking at this very, very granularly saying, okay, these are the people we're targeting on the ad platforms across various platforms. And then these are the people that are showing up in the CRM after the fact. And so we've
Mm.
segmented them by their core segments. We want to reach these professionals in these particular industries, these end users that are, whatever they are, residential end users or whatever they're going to end up being. And we've categorized what comes out of the back end. And
Hmm.
then further is which ones of these turned into revenue generating opportunities.
Mm.
And what we found is this sort of structure where Meta says, hey, let us pick, actually
Hmm.
unintentionally feeds all of the fraud that happens on Meta because you're going to have these bad actors that are engaging in Meta activities that are filling out forms to bury their, what we would view as fraudulent or black hat, like we're posting negative reviews and
Hmm.
we're spamming other people. Well, to bury that, they do real activities. They go and like pages, they click on ads, they fill out forms, they do the sorts of things. And so there's this, I would say, unintentional symbiotic relationship between Meta and its fake users, where
Hmm.
Meta's fake users have to engage in real activities to bury their activity, but Meta knows and is complicit with it. Like
Yeah.
I get 50 email notifications across Meta, like business accounts that says, "Hey, your page is going to
Your page
expire or
is going to be
whatever,"
turned off. Yes. Oh, I
and
finally
they're
turned off all my notifications, getting so many of
and
those.
and the problem with that is Meta could stop this, but they
Absolutely.
won't stop it because there's a
Yeah.
significant, they have an incentive on the revenue side to keep going. So Meta, if
Yeah.
you're listening, stop it. It's making
Which
us
they
all
are.
stop
You know they
trusting your
are.
platform. I
Yeah.
hope so.
Right.
And so I think
No, I
part of
think you're
that
right.
is we're spending money and it looks like we're generating really good results and we have attribution to really good results and our cost per action has dropped by whatever to a third of what we were spending before, but it doesn't translate into 3x more revenue for the organization that we're running ads for, and
Yeah.
ultimately that leads to a dissatisfied customer. Right,
Yeah.
we're not
And
happy, our customer's not happy, and we're not getting the results that we want from our ad spend.
Right. And I think there's a real important takeaway there. If you are running ads, especially if you're, paying an agency like ours or a freelancer to help you run those ads, like make sure you are giving them good feedback on the quality of those leads, that you're evaluating the quality of those leads, and that you are feeding that information back into the system to say, hey, we may have done all these, optimizations in our ad, but it didn't produce the kinds of leads that we're actually looking for. I think that's really important work. Um, so the last year, yeah, we've seen prices increase. We've seen AI take over. We've seen an influx of bad leads. I think we've also seen some real challenges in just attribution and attributing those leads to the place, even the good ones and the bad ones, to the places that they came from. So talk about that for a little bit. Like what have been those challenges in conversion tracking and attribution?
Yeah, and if you're not familiar with attribution, this gets a little bit geeky. The whole point of attribution says, I did these 5 or 6 sort of activities. Which ones get credit for the sale? which
Mm,
ones get credit for the lead being generated. And so you'll have tools that give you different attribution models. The problem is they're all measuring attribution just slightly differently. So
hmm
when you run some Google ads, they're looking at a CPA, an action that you take on your website, and you're going to tell them they filled out this form. And that form is worth X to me. Or you've got some sort of, Google now has basically two attribution models, a data-driven model, which is sort of giving some credit to all of the things in the chain, or a last click attribution model. And the more we have dived into this, the more time we've spent into this, and let's say the promise of this, 5, 10 years ago was, hey, we're going to know how to give credit to every activity, and it's going to be this very black and white process. You pick your
hmm
attribution model, you lean hard into it, and we're going to be able to see everything. We'll be able to attribute every penny of marketing spend. And this year has been a very frustrating conversation for someone like me that really latched hard onto that idea and fought
hmm
hard to make sure that every dollar counted, because the
Yeah.
attribution actually got significantly harder in the last 12 months than it's ever been before.
Mm,
This, a good example of this, another great, we're running ads for a credit union, and they're in a data-driven attribution model. The last click attribution models in general don't work for a lot of these sorts of things. It's a choice, but it's not necessarily, at this point they're both bad choices in my opinion. You have to have some
hmm
other tool that layers on attribution. And
mm,
the real reason is that cookie tracking and privacy rights have gotten so much harder. And so especially when you're in some of these environments where you have cross domain tracking, they leave from one platform to go to another one for a
hmm
banking application or something like that. All of those attribution models get lost.
hmm
And so we've had to put in a lot of third-party tools, not just, you have 3 or 4 sorts of safety checks so you can
hmm
triangulate your data and say, does this all really count? And
Right.
so we now have this data set. So Google says we have 192.4 conversions this month. And
hmm
so we look at that number and we think, 192 people filled out a form, zero point 0.4. What would that mean? Like a really short person? How does that go? But what really comes out is that Google gave zero point 0.2 for this one and zero point 0.4 for this one. And so it's not 192. But they don't ever
Right.
tell you what are the unique conversions out of here. That really
Right.
represents 680 people. Go back to Google Analytics or GA4 or HubSpot, or go back to Meridian Link, your loan origination system, and say, did you get 600 applications ish?
Right.
But
Yeah.
because we don't have that data set and we're just looking at 192, we're thinking, hey, a third of the 600 applications started from Google. And that's not true. So now
Right.
we don't have this like through line in that conversion story of what actually counts. And a lot of those, because of privacy settings and something like Safari or whatever else, are going to track that conversion. They hide it. And so the next
hmm
tool that looks at it goes, well, that's not a Google ad, that's a direct ad. That's a direct
hmm
traffic conversion.
hmm
And so now, like, all of this attribution just got really, really hard. And
Right.
so now we're trying to figure out, well, we're paying money to Google. Is this thing working or not? But there's a bigger problem behind that is Google needs to know that this conversion came from Google so that the AI driven algorithm knows how to find
Right.
more people that are like that. And so
Right.
if it doesn't work and it's AI driven and it doesn't see the conversion on the other end,
Yeah.
everybody's flying blind, including the engine that's supposed to be driving finding more people. And so we're shooting
Yeah.
ourselves in the foot because conversion got really hard, attribution got really hard, and then we put all of our faith in this AI sort of algorithm that's supposed to find more people that are generating conversion, then they don't exist. And so
Right.
we're entering into this really complex world that's going to get harder and harder if the fundamentals can't get figured out.
Right. Yeah, and you introduce all these different tools to help you make assessments about what's working and what's not working. And I think too, there's even the expectation among the client that every tool is going to tell the same story and is going to have the same numbers. Hey, why don't our form responses in, HubSpot match our event count in Google Analytics, match our conversions? And there's no correlation. They don't match,
Yeah.
and you can mine through it and look for trends and little flags and indicators. But it really is, how do you look across the landscape of all this data and form some sort of story about what's happening out there in the marketplace. Not to mention, you throw all that fraudulent traffic on top of it, and now we can't distinguish necessarily, who's a real person and who's not. Um, on the fraud piece, there's a tool that you've been using to kind of combat some of that fraud. Like, what are you seeing out there that's actually helping us kind of fight the fraud piece?
Oh man, there are a lot of tools that are out there. We use a few of them. The one we're using for Meta and Google, which I like and I don't like. I think there's some advantages
Hmm.
to doing it. It's sort of a brute force tool at this point. So that tool is ClickCease. And so what we do with that is the tool is actually monitoring which user behavior. If somebody clicks an ad 5 or 6 times, I can say, hey, block that person from seeing
Mm.
more ads so that that doesn't continue to escalate. And so even that is getting harder and harder. We're seeing some more difficulty in implementing some of those tools because Meta with their Creative Plus ad audience expansion won't allow us to add those to negative audience list exclusions. I
Oh,
don't know if you,
wow.
yeah, even more mess.
Yeah.
But what it does is it basically says if they violate these rules, you click too many times in a day or too many times in a week, or you hit the website and immediately leave, don't serve them ads anymore. And it creates this exclusion list, either based off of their IP address or machine ID. And so then you kind of hopefully start filtering out these bots or humans that are just clicking up your ad campaigns and costing you a bunch of money but don't actually generate revenue. So there are
That's
some
great.
tools like that are helpful in this regard. There's also
Yeah.
process that's going along with this, like what to your point, the idea of finding the lead quality. You We used to have this language of like building a source of truth, and we use the CRM or a HubSpot or marketing automation platform, and
Hmm.
I've actually had to work on killing that specific phrase from any sales engagement
Single source of
or
truth.
marketing engagement because
Yeah, it doesn't
there
exist.
isn't a single source of truth anymore. It's this
Right.
triangulation process where we're saying, well, this one is over here, and hopefully if we triple the amount of inbound leads that are coming through that have this sort of behavior, and that goes to our customer journey mapping process, right? Do they have
Right.
fit? Are they
Right.
generating the right behavior? Is this an actual sales accepted lead where it's a real human on the other end of it that we
Right.
verified with multiple activity, including page views and email opens and all this sort of stuff?
Hmm.
Then this conversion rate will hold true into opportunities, and you have a 20 or 30% conversion rate from stage to stage, and you start working on elevating all of that. So now we're
Yeah.
having to implement more third parties like ClickCease, or in the banking environment, things like Alpha Rank, or in
Yeah.
attribution reporting, like HubSpot has some great tools for this, or Wicked Reports, or some of these other sorts of third party tools that then tie in and say, you know, forget the cookie. Let's look at some other ways of looking at this. And there's technology that's out there that's available right now. Like AlphaRank is using a fingerprinting process that looks at the
Hmm.
browser size and the plugins that are installed and says, hey, if we know this specific device showed up here, and then it went to this other platform here, and then we tied in the loan ID with the, attribution, the campaign source in the beginning, and now we can match all this up and you have some funded loan on the back end. And that's this level of complexity that requires manual intervention to tie these two together. And so we're
Right.
doing some interesting things in that regard now. We're like matching up the GCLID ID, the click ID that's happening with the specific funded loan application. We're saying, Google, go find more of these. And we're doing this manual customer match process. I
Yeah.
think all of these are really innovative things to try, but it's
Yeah.
only necessary because this environment got really, really complex really fast. And so we're
Yeah.
trying to
Well, I
work our way
think,
through it and find some good results.
yeah, I mean, I think you're onto something. We're in the postmodern era of digital marketing where every platform is living its own truth, and we don't really know what is real. And so you have to work extra extra hard to fight for clarity and truth. And you mentioned, and there's a few things that you're even having to fight harder on that I want to get to, and we only have a couple more minutes. But you mentioned emails. And
Oh,
another thing that I think we know is coming in the year ahead, and this can even lead us into our predictions, is that if if privacy clampdowns continue to happen, even at the ISP level, that email deliverability is going to get harder and harder. So talk about that for a couple minutes, and we'll kind of wrap up from there.
Yeah, Google and Yahoo, and once the major platforms go, everybody sort of follows suit. Has issued a new guidance that says if you don't have your DMARC settings, and that's um, it's a verification like technology, a profile that says these tools are allowed to send on behalf of this email domain. So HubSpot is allowed to send on behalf of 454 Creative. And so you have to set
Hmm.
up a couple of records in your DNS settings that says these things can send on your behalf. Most people don't need this or don't even think about it. You're using a MailChimp or Constant Contact or maybe like an email sales sequencing tool like, I don't know,
Apollo.
Apollo. There's a lot of those sorts of
Yeah.
things that are out there. Now what happens is you have to do a little more IT work to get those through. And the hope is that what that does is clamps down on spam senders. We're getting
Which is a
flooded
good
with
thing.
spam. Yeah, it's a great thing.
Yeah.
Uh, and so you're seeing that in particular in email. If you're a smaller organization, you haven't authenticated those records, you're sending from an email tool and you haven't touched it in a year or two. I guarantee this is something that you should be thinking about. This is worth an email or a direct message to one of us. We'll gladly help you walk you through it and just do a safety check. That's a quick check
Yeah.
for your IT support provider. Are my DMARC settings correct? And that's normally a DKIM record or an SPF record. Lots of
Hmm.
acronyms that are gobbledygook that you probably don't need to know, but you should have somebody check for you.
Yeah.
I think that the same thing is going to happen with cookies. I think the same thing is going to happen, and hopefully will start happening with the social profiles like LinkedIn or Meta, where they're starting to clamp down on the fraud because people are sick of the noise. And if
Yeah.
the noise continues and the AI allows you to create more and more and more and more, eventually what you have to do is to get back to human. Is this a real
Hmm.
human that's sending it? Is this meaningful to the end user? And so hopefully that next level of tool is going to start building that human sort of algorithm to say, is this meaningful to you?
Yeah.
I haven't seen technology do this naturally. What we've seen is the opposite. All of a sudden they're getting revenue, and so they start to create more noise. And what level of
Hmm.
noise is acceptable to give us revenue but keep a human engaged? And so
Yeah.
I think that's the tightrope balance that we're going to predict for next year. Is it's going to get messier, and I think people are going to have to start figuring it out by platform. Europe is forcing Facebook to actually charge users for an ad-free
Hmm.
version of the platform that doesn't track privacy. So if you advertise in Europe, get ready to have all of your meta campaigns be virtually meaningless until they figure
Yeah.
this out.
Absolutely.
And so I think that model is going to start to replicate through. And I think
Yeah.
hopefully this yields a better human experience that serves humans. That's the whole point of AI, right? A better human
Hmm.
experience, more time on your hands, because the way that you would target and provide value is sort of clear. But I think that there's going to be a mess before, it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah. That's great. Well, really appreciate your thoughts and your predictions, and it'll be fun to continue this conversation in the next couple of weeks about, the things that are pressing for 2024, the stuff that's changing. Feels like every week, there's something that's evolving, and so we'll keep talking about those things.
Yeah. Thanks, Chad.
All right.